Welcome back to Gaming for some more on Nightingale. Today we're going to go over a review. I've been playing the game for the better part of a year and a half, playtesting behind the scenes, and recently the developers gave us early access to test out some of the features and get some content ready ahead of the launch today on the 20th. Now I've got a decent amount of hours in the game, over 50, maybe even 100 if you count some of those playtests. But my review is based on the past few days and the gameplay that I've been doing recently, which is around about 40 to 50 hours. I've got a decent way through the game and I'm really enjoying it so far. We're going to go over everything from the in-game systems all the way through to the storyline. There's a lot of detail in this game. It is definitely going to be one of, if not the best survival games of 2024. So if you're a fan of Nightingale, subscribe to the channel and stick around for much more Nightingale content. If you do like more survival games, we're going to be covering some of those here on the channel as well. That is normally what we do. We focus mainly on survival games, indie, and some of the bigger releases. So stick around for much more. Now, first things first is the character creation. Character creation is absolutely amazing on this game. There is so many things you can do, and so many things that they're going to be added in the future. It is a massive part of the storyline. At the moment, there's definitely more things that could be added, but overall, the character creation is very detailed. You can customize everything from your facial features to the irises and the veins in your eyes. There are many things that you can do, and they're going to be adding much more, such as scars, tattoos, different hair colours, and many different varieties. You can create any character you want. Now, some people aren't really a fan of the character style. I do see what they've gone for. I am 50-50 on it, but it is an enjoyable experience. Customizing a character, it's relatively simplistic, and there are many things that you can do to it. At later stages in the character creation, you can actually improve your lineage, so your character has your parents, your grandparents, and your great-grandparents, and then you can mold your character off of those characters that you've picked, which works really, really well and is definitely an interesting feature and something I haven't seen before. And then once you've finished that character creation, that is not the only part of customization there is. When you do progress further into the game and the storyline, there are many customization elements when it comes to the clothing and the homestead that you decide to build. So overall, I think the character creation is really interesting. It's definitely a good part of the game, and I can definitely see them adding a lot of decent features in the future. There's still a fair chunk missing from that character creation, like traits and stuff like that, but adding things like that in the future I think would be great. Next up is the UI. The UI has been a source of a little bit of contention over the past few days because they have completely overhauled it. Now, I am a fan of the older UI, especially that center circle, which has your health, your stamina, your food, and your sleep all in there in one little bunch right at the center of the screen. In the new version, they've moved everything over to the left-hand side. In the old version, there was a hotbar in the middle, but it was really irritating because it started from the left-hand side, 9 to 0. Now, I wasn't a fan of the old hotbar layout. The old hotbar layout had 9, 8, 7, 6 on the left-hand side. And then on the right-hand side, it had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, which I thought was really confusing and a little bit annoying. And now they've mixed that up and swapped it round. So now the hotbar on the bottom is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Just goes on through as a normal countdown should, which I find is much easier to actually move through the hotkeys rather than fanning around, having to look at it and go, oh, yeah. Now, when it's in order, I think it just makes it much more easier for your brain to go bang, 1, 2, and you can see it at the bottom of the screen. But when the numbers are out of order, it can be a bit of a pain and you could just press a corresponding button and then end up with the wrong thing in your hand. That's just my experience anyway. But overall, the UI looks really interesting, especially when you get into the menus. At first, the menus can be a little bit cumbersome, but when you do get used to what you're doing and understand where things are, the UI and the menu system really open up and to become really, really easy to mess around with. It does start to get a little bit more complex when you progress through and add more items like enchantments, but after that slight learning curve, it does become really easy to play around with and things become nice and simple. As well as looking relatively pleasing, especially with the building and crafting, you have like the cards which have the images on. At first that can be a little bit difficult because you do have to sort of look and guess. But when you do get a little bit of knowledge of what these items are, you can see it without actually having to click each one and figure out what they are. It does have that little bit of a learning curve to it when it comes to the crafting aspect. But overall, it's beautifully done and it works really well with the game's theme. Next up, we're going to be talking about the terrain and the overall ambience of the game. Now, that is something that I really like and I think really shines through in Nightingale. Overall, the biomes look stunning, the terrain looks great, and it gives that overall feeling of awe when you're up at those beautiful mountaintop places, looking around and you can see all the POIs off in the distance and the animals doing their thing. It looks really cool, it is visually pleasing. And performance-wise, works really well. I haven't had any performance issues at all. I play on max settings, and I have got a relatively decent rig, so if you've got a mid-range rig, I do think you'll be able to play this relatively nicely without any issues at all. But even those horrid biomes, like the swamps and the deserts, that do pose a real threat to you, they have that beautiful feeling to them as well. You can climb up to some of the higher up areas and get a view of the whole realm, and everything looks tranquil, peaceful. It's not until you go down into things and then you start to get attacked, or you start to get poisoned, or get a virus from running through the muddy water, or overheating. These things enhance that gameplay and do make these beautiful realms look and feel a little bit more lively and realistic, with certain elements that do decide to injure you as you just wander through, not just enemies and animals. Another great thing about every biome is the POIs. There are many things that you can do in Nightingale, all the way from puzzles to progressing through the storyline to building and crafting an entire estate that you fancy. There are loads and loads of different things and different ways you can approach scenarios. The POIs look absolutely stunning. They have various things in them. You can go there, you can collect items. Sometimes you'll need to fight some enemies. Sometimes you'll need to complete a puzzle. But from the distance, they all look amazing. You can see a shipwreck poking up from the tree line, or some giant structure that you'll have to climb to the top of to get a reward. There are many things out there that just look awesome, and they do have a purpose as well. There's not going to be anything in the game that you can see off in the distance, go to, arrive there, and there be nothing. There is always something to explore. There's also much bigger POIs which are tied to your gear score. Gear score is something that you'll need to progress with and work on as you go through the storyline, and the tutorial will help you do that. But these bigger POIs have many enemies in them, and even a boss fight at the end of some. Now these are worth the actual hassle and the fight that you have to go through, because they've always got some great rewards, such as realm cards, decent amount of essence, and some potions that you may need later down the line. These things are great, they are loads of fun, and each one I've been to has been relatively different. Sometimes you get to the ending and the bosses are the same, they just tend to vary in their difficulty level, where they'll fight back a little bit harder, or they'll hit a little bit harder. But overall, the POIs, especially the major ones, are really interesting. I've spent many hours in the game, and I haven't come across the same one twice yet. Now the game does also have a storyline, which is really interesting. It's brought to you through a cinematic at the start of the game, and then through many encounters with NPCs and Hope Echoes that you come across. Now Hope Echoes are sort of like diary entries. You'll be able to find these dotted all around the realms, and they'll explain certain aspects of the story, and then you can progress further through certain storyline dialogues with NPCs, which will give you hints and tell you where things are and where you need to be going. And you'll be able to interact with these NPCs and even gain companions through them. You'll be able to progress through, and they will help you learn a little bit about what Nightingale is, what your purpose is, and what the Realmwalkers are doing these days. It's very interesting how they've brought it together in that story, and I really do like the Hope Echoes that you find, because they are just random bits of information dotted around, but they've got some really interesting lore to them. And the flagship feature of the game is the realm cards. Now the realm cards I really enjoy, they work really well, and it's something that's very different. The way that realm cards work is you will have a biome and a major realm card. Now these realm cards you can place together with certain other realm cards, and it will basically enhance and drastically change the way that each realm is portrayed and how you progress through them. Now the biome cards are the obvious ones, which are the desert, the forest, and the swamp. There are many major cards that you can come across which affect certain things in those realms, such as the amount of enemies that spawn, the amount of loot that you'll find, and the amount of fish that you can catch. There's pretty much a realm card for everything and anything. Now these realm cards will drastically change the game, because you can place one realm card with a forest biome, move away, and then change the major realm card, and that same forest biome will be completely different when you go back, with maybe different enemies in, different loot in, or a different vibe completely. And we will have a more detailed video on realm cards and how they work in a few days' time. Now, as this is a survival game, farming is going to be a big part of it. The estate building and crafting are huge parts, and you're going to need to farm a lot of materials to get those up and running. Now, farming in this game is done really nicely. It is engaging and it's enjoyable. If you've got a companion with you as well, it really helps speed things up and you can get a decent structure built relatively quickly. And something that really helps the farming aspect is how the POIs have been placed. You'll be running through farming for items, and then you'll come across random POIs, which take your attention away from that farming aspect, so it doesn't feel like you are long-windedly going around just digging up items, chopping down trees. It really breaks it up coming across the POIs and the certain animals that you'll see dotted around. And when you are farming, you will get a decent amount of resources from items like rocks and trees, so it's not over cumbersome. It doesn't take too long to actually gather the resources that you need to build a structure. And you can also have your companion help you farm items, chop down trees, mine ore, and then take these items back to your base, so you're not doing everything on your own, which works really, really nicely. You just got to make sure your companion doesn't go and chuck all of your wood on a fire, because that can happen, and that is a little bit annoying. But if you are building a structure, your companion will pick up the required resources and go and fill items in whilst you're doing what you want to do. Now, the companions are tied to you, so they will follow you round. If you are just stood in your base and not really doing anything, they'll hang around too. If there's a couple of trees or items that they can mine nearby, they will go and do it, but they won't stray too far from you. So do bear that in mind when you want your companion to do a little bit of work. Next, the building system. The building system is extremely simple, and it works really, really nicely with the blueprint system that they've got. You'll be able to gather blueprints from items dotted around the world and from essence traders. Now, essence traders can be found in every realm, and they will all have different items on them. As you progress through, you will gain essence. If you do need to know how to get more of that, there is a video of tips and tricks that I did. It is in the top right now. But the blueprint system allows you to build your entire base without using any resources at all. And then, as you can see, it is like a blueprint. You can smack it all down and then build the whole thing up to how you want. And then have a step back and look and say, is that what I want? And if it is, bang, smack the resources in there and you can build your base. The building is really simplistic, but it can get nice and creative when you've got a decent amount of blueprints gathered up from traders, and you can make some really interesting structures in the game. And then when it comes to the interior of your base, there are many, many things that you can build in there. Now, this is one of the downsides, I think, of the game. I do like that there's many crafting benches and many things that you can create, but it seems like you need a different crafting bench for every other item. There is a lot of crafting benches to be built to get to the certain items that you want to get to sort of mid to late game, which I do find enjoyable, but when you're trying to build one or two things, you've got to go to 17 different benches to build certain aspects of one item to put together in a 18th bench to then create that final item, which I can find a little bit tedious. I do think they need to bring in some sort of system which allows your benches to all be connected. So then once they are connected, all you've got to do is go to one bench, build it, go to another bench, build it, rather than having to go backwards and forwards between your resources. Resource management is going to be a key factor towards the later stages of the game. If you've got your inventory and your resources dotted everywhere and anywhere, it's going to take a lot longer to build things. Overall, though, it is enjoyable and there's a lot of cool stuff you can create. I just hope that they do fine-tune and improve that building and crafting process a little bit more, so you're not running backwards and forwards for half an hour just to create one item. And finally, combat. Combat I found to be a little bit in the middle. I've tried it on 3 difficulties. Easy difficulty, combat felt relatively boring and was over pretty quickly. And then on hard, it was more enjoyable. The overall AI of the enemies doesn't really change too much, that I've noticed. The AI stays pretty much the same, the enemies just hit harder, and they take more to actually kill, which I think is a downside. I think having a harder difficulty, having the enemies sort of jump around a little bit more, move a little bit more, and have different attacks would have been a little bit more interesting. But overall, it does feel smooth and engaging when you are playing on a harder difficulty, or you've gone to a harder realm. The combat mechanics from the player standpoint do feel really engaging and really smooth. But when it comes to the enemies, their AI does feel rather simplistic. They do the same attacks, they're very predictable, and they can be a bit of a pain when there's a big chunk of them. But when there's just a couple of them, they're easily outmaneuvered. You can jump, you can dodge out of their way, and it's not too much of an issue at all. When you do get to some of the harder enemies later down the line, that is where it becomes really interesting, especially with some of those bigger boss variant enemies. because that is not just a way that you can brute force through. You do have to be strategic, watch how they actually attack and how they move around, and then plan your actions accordingly. So the combat really opens up as you progress through. At first, it feels a little bit meh, but it does get better. And at the beginning, all it takes is a slight learning curve, and once you've got that learning curve done, it's relatively easy to beat most, if not all of the enemies that you come across, until you get sort of later stages, when enemies start to become a little bit tougher, and you go to some of those harder realms. Then things get a little bit more complex, but still really enjoyable. Now overall, I've really enjoyed Nightingale. I've got almost 100 hours in the game now, including some of my playtest time, and I've really enjoyed everything that has been going on, and I can't wait to see the future of the game. Overall, for 30 quid, I would 100% recommend it if you are a fan of survival games. It's definitely interesting, it will keep you engaged, and for that price, 30 quid, there's definitely over 100 hours of content here, so I would say it's 100% worth that money. I don't know if there's going to be any Steam sales within the next few days or weeks, but I would definitely recommend picking it up anyway. It's a great game, it's really enjoyable, and I can't wait to see what the developers do in the future. What do you guys think about Nightingale? Let me know in the comments down below. For now, we're going to wrap that one up there. I've been Wired, you've been awesome, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.